And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. I'm Tom Fornelli. He's Bud Elliott. Somewhere off in the distance joining us shortly is Chip Patterson, but he's talking to a plumber right now because his toilet is leaking. So if we want to keep track of Chip's maladies in the last 24 hours, yesterday his internet went out mid-show, lost his phone service, and now his toilet is leaking. So Chip, he's living that new house life, discovering all the small little, problems that he's going to have to deal with before he can really settle in. But he'll be with us shortly. Frankly, we don't need him. I mean, I'm not supposed to bring it up, but I will just say another podcast wanted to fight us and they were trying to do matchups for who could take who. And they said they're not worried about Chip. I would just say that the other three members of this show could probably beat up that entire other show with or without Chip. Just going to throw that out there. But there was some news yesterday, a lot of news actually coming because of meetings going on in Arizona. But one of the things that came out that I found interesting, and maybe not in the best way, was the Big 12. The headline is Big 12 looking to modernize television broadcasts with in-game interviews, expanded locker room access. The move is to spice up the TV broadcasts is the latest potential change under Commissioner Brett Yormark. Who's asking for this, Bud?
I actually am going to argue with you here, and this is not planned argument. I think this is probably a smart move by the Big 12. When I look at the new Big 12, I see a league that has a really high floor. Now that Kansas has his act together, there's really no bad teams. There's a lot of teams sort of in that like 28 to 48 power rating type range. So they're going to have good competitive games that a lot of college football fans will want to watch. But a lot of casual football fans won't, right? And we saw that with the ratings for Texas and Oklahoma. There's a reason ESPN was willing to pay so much to poach those teams, because if you're going to do really big ratings, you need casual fans. You cannot make a living on the diehards unless you're a subscription service, which obviously they're not. So I think anything that can maybe be unique or different or help to draw in the casual fan, because I'm going to be watching the Big 12. I think it's going to be really good, really competitive, exciting ball, everything down to the finish line. If you got something that's going to help to draw the casuals in because it's a little bit different than what you normally see, that's kind of different. Oh, like you watch it at a bar. Oh, look at that. That's kind of neat. I think that's a pretty smart move for a league that lacks a top 15 job, right? That lacks a team that you can say, yeah, if they're right, they're contending for a natty, right? They don't have a national championship contender that if they're doing everything right, it's going to work in that league. As a one-off, sure. And we loved TCU last year, but be different. And I think if you get people in because it's different, they might enjoy the actual football they're watching.
My counter to that, you and I will be watching the Big 12 because we know it's a good league. Chip and Danny will be watching the Big 12 because they know it's a good league. Our listeners will be watching the Big 12 because they understand the point. But as a casual college football fan, I'm going to pick a Baylor Oklahoma State game because I'll be able to hear the coach talking over Georgia and whoever they're playing that week is the big game of the week, or the Ohio State game. I don't think that's a really feasible thing. I don't blame them for trying it. I just have very high skeptical thoughts that it's going to work. And then it's also like, this is the day after the Big 12 is thinking of playing games in Mexico. Why? Like, what are you trying to gain? Like, is Mexico some untapped potential? Honestly, it reminds me of when Larry Scott at the Pac-12 was trying to get the China market. You're a college football conference. You are not a professional sports league. You are not going to be tapping in. Nobody down there is going to care. And as I texted us in the group thread yesterday, this is just my feeling. I could be 1,000% wrong. To me, so far, Brett Yormark is just Larry Scott, Jay-Z contact info in his phone. That's really the only difference that I have seen so far. I don't know what the Big 12 has done to improve the product of that it's going to have after it loses Texas and Oklahoma since Yormark has taken over. I know that they've done kind of like the British ape thing where like the crossover where they had that at the championship game. Like, it's a whole lot of Instagram stuff to me. I don't know what they're doing to improve the football. It feels very cosmetic and kind of the cool kids are going to like this, but are the cool kids ever really going to like Big 12 football?
You're right on that. Now, the one pushback I would have to the Larry Scott thing, I should have put this in the group chat, but is that Yormark at least can also be pragmatic And the number one thing, like all these other ideas can be pie in the sky and maybe silly and may not work. The one thing that did work was kneecapping the Pac-12 by jumping them in line to realize, hey, our league is not as attractive as it used to be. We need to lock in this deal with ESPN before the Pac-12 can. And like that clearly gave them a little bit of a leg up in some areas on the Pac-12. So even if all of these new crazy ideas that Brett Yormark has fail, like if they all suck, if they don't get more casuals to watch these games, they're still in a better spot than what Larry Scott left, because like Larry Scott's idea for the Pac-12 network was interesting, but the execution, mainly by him and like some of his exec staff was horrendous, right? So I think he's a little more pragmatic than Larry Scott, but there are some similarities with these out there ideas. Do you think that because there's such a large, like Texas and Southwest, or the kind of like Central American footprint in the Big 12, and obviously Texas has a large Hispanic population, that trying to reach out and play a game or two in Mexico maybe furthers your efforts to connect with the Hispanic viewer, which I think is, if you're a TV exec, having a larger population of Hispanic viewers is something you would endeavor to, and probably not something that's happening right now. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't see a downside to it. Maybe.
No, I don't know if there's a downside. I just feel like it's doing things to do them. As far as it's more that I don't know how much of an impact it's actually going to have. Like, you might convert a few fans because there are football fans in Mexico. We've seen that with the NFL having success. So maybe you can convert a few. It's just, I don't know. Like, if I'm looking at as an American as far as European sports, I'm into European sports. Like, I like soccer, but if cricket said, we're going to go play a match in Chicago, I'm not going to go watch, because I don't give a damn about cricket. You know what I mean? So it's playing there is not really going to do it for me. I don't know. Chip, what are your thoughts? How's your toilet, buddy?
I hope that we will have resolution with the great caper of why the master bed toilet started leaking. We will. Oh, if you want play-by-play updates, perhaps I can provide them. It's Bathing Ape, as the youngest of this. I think British ape, Bathing Ape.
I don't know whatever it is.
I believe
it's a camouflage ape. Oh, cool.
If the Big 12 is going to capitalize on basketball, now is the time to do it, because they are absolutely running the game in basketball. And but honestly, I had not thought about just trying to expand your customer base, right? Like, just trying to be like, okay, we might have a huge percent of the population in the Big 12 footprint that is not connected to our football product, but maybe we might be able to tap into that. So I think there's probably something to that. All this comes down to the fact, to me, that the Big 12 knows it has maxed out how much money it can make from traditional revenue streams.
That's a good point.
When Brett Yormark is talking to the athletic directors and the university presidents, he's saying, like, look, this deal is as good as I can get. And if you really want to close the gap with the SEC and the Big 10, we are not going to do it from our television deal. We are going to have to do it from other revenue streams. So that was my strongest take from this is, okay, they realize they've maxed out. And I can't say that I hate at least the initiative to try and get creative about finding ways to make your schools more money, because that the in-game interviews, all of this is just trying to do anything to just like get a little bit more value, because otherwise they've maxed it out. I mean, even further expansion would mean they max out, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's still, we can transition to Dennis's latest story on this too, if we want, but like, he wrote in his latest one about their TV rights. They are keeping that open dialogue with the Four Corners schools. So I don't know that that's done yet.
But on a per school basis, it's not like adding those schools is not going to be able to drive it up. And that's where you have to go to Mexico, to Rucker Park, and create all these, extra little things just to be able to make it happen.
Can we get like Mexico City, the university, like a school there in the Big 12? Can we just go like the first international conference?
Maybe.
Do
they have a good football team?
But they probably have a good football team, but I don't know if they have a good football team.
I always like when have you all taken any chat questions yet?
No.
Okay, I always love when
Bud and I don't deal with the peasants, Chip.
Let's go. Hey, listen, I'll tell you what. I am 6 feet, 160 pounds. Dainty is not like it's mean, but it is not incorrect, right? I prefer rangy. Okay. Like Randy Brickley once described me as rangy but scrappy when we had some things got really, really tense and we were considering what physical violence might look like if I was involved. I am generally not a fighter. Again, 6 feet, 160 pounds. So like Dainty, mean, not totally inaccurate, but you know, I fight when I feel threatened and I don't feel like fighting. So
I mean, I thought we weren't going to talk about it.
hey, listen. All right. This one comes from Kyle. Who gets their buyout first, Jimbo or Mel Tucker?
Tucker.
Jimbo.
Ooh.
Oh, we got beef.
For this reason. A&M has a lot of people who could pony up for it. It sounds like from the reports I've read, Michigan State has one guy that sort of guaranteed a lot of that contract. A&M has much bigger expectations than Michigan State does. Whether that's justified or not, I'm not entirely sure. I think it kind of is, but and Tucker has not had as long there as Jimbo has, right? So I think for those reasons, especially if LSU is as good as I think they might be this year, that's another team right next to you that you're like, I mean, that guy just got there and he's way ahead of you. So I would say Jimbo gets it first.
Those are all feasible points. I go with Tucker simply because if you look at Michigan State right now and you look at what's going on in the Big Ten, like not even just looking at USC coming in to join the party, but Ohio State is Ohio State. Michigan in the last couple of years has taken the step forward of winning the conference 2 years in a row, getting to the college football playoff 2 years in a row. And when Michigan State, like, you know, there is the little brother complex when it comes to football between Michigan State and Michigan. When Michigan is down, Michigan State swings for the fences when they've had a chance to. And that's what happened with Mel Tucker. Michigan was struggling at the time. Michigan State was coming off a huge season. They got to the Peach Bowl. Bang, let's lock it up. When that's the case, Michigan State boosters are a little bit more willing to kind of, you know, pony up, as we saw in evidence with Mel Tucker's contract. So if the Spartans things are going the way they did last year, if like this team like just gets to a bowl game or misses out on a bowl game and Michigan wins the Big Ten again, I think somebody will be angry enough to do something about it. I just think there's a bigger chance than some people realize.
I think it is Tucker. I think it's Michigan State. And I think that the reason is because ultimately Michigan State cares more about basketball than it does about football. Now you could argue that that's why they would move faster on Jimbo, but I also think that's why they would say this was an expensive mistake. Let's cut bait and, you know, let's plow ahead. Let's do something that's not going to continue to bleed us. They're going to have to replace Tom Izzo soon. The top priority for the top boosters in the next 5 to 10 years is making sure that all of the work that Tom Izzo has done for that basketball program is able to be maintained by the successor. And I think, I mean, I've heard from the basketball side, their NIL operation is like up and rolling. And Bud, maybe you can help me on the football side, but like they are losing very important players to the transfer portal. So you could wonder what the investment is on that side too.
So, okay. Quick clarification on that. They did get the Brantley kid to come back. Mm-hmm. I don't think Coleman is an NIL thing. I think like if you look at the schools that Coleman is reportedly considering, right? North Carolina, Oklahoma, Florida State, LSU. All four of those teams, like legitimate NFL draft prospects. I mean, like Jordan Travis, Jane Daniels, and Gabriel are going to get drafted, and Drake may be the first overall pick. Peyton Thorne is probably not going to be drafted. I would think that was the guy he was playing with there at Michigan State. So I don't know that Michigan State's NIL game is bad. I don't really buy the reports that that's a pure just chase the bag NIL transfer on his part. I mean, it's kind of like, all right, you got a kid from Louisiana, no real connections to the state of Michigan, doesn't like quarterback play. Everywhere that he's considering is at least closer to home. My rebuttal on the Michigan State agreement from my co-host here, which I'll try to lead you guys to the light. Who hired Jimbo at LSU?
Scott Woodward.
Right. So back to the idea of like one guy guaranteeing the contract at Michigan State. If Michigan State fires Mel Tucker, that's an embarrassment for the dude who had to put that contract there, right? That's him admitting. That's one guy admitting, hey, I screwed up. I bought into this guy. I fell for him and he couldn't get it done. At A&M, nobody really has to wear that because the AD who's there now, whether or not you think is a good AD or not, which I think is a really fair discussion to have, it's not on him if Jimbo doesn't work out because Scott Woodward made the hire. It's not on any singular booster at A&M if they fire Jimbo. So I think there's less sort of egg on their face, despite the fact that they gave him a national championship trophy with no date and nameplate on it yet. But I just think
that's Virginia Tech, how that's going.
Right. Like egos do play into this. When your sport is financed by TV, but also still by boosters and decision makers, it's the reason I think Billy Napier's going to get time at Florida. Because if Scott Strickland has to fire Billy Napier, do you think Scott Strickland gets to make a third hire after making a third firing? I don't. So I kind of think that there's a principal agent problem here too, right? Where sometimes like a GM makes a draft pick that's not in the interest of the school or of the team long term, but he realizes if his team doesn't win in the next year, he's going to get fired. So I think it's A&M, but it also really depends on what you think of these teams this year. I mean,
that's the other thing. I think Texas A&M is going to be better than Michigan State.
I do too.
All right. Any big takeaways from Ben Bryant to Northwestern, former Cincinnati quarterback, or any other portal notes before we hit the break and then open up the big old bag of mail?
I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking Ben Bryant last year with Cincinnati. I'm not surprised if Northwestern considers him an upgrade over what they had on the roster. So if I'm a Northwestern fan, I'm probably happy to have him entering the competition. But at the same time, after spring practice is wrapped up, the fact that you're adding Ben Bryant doesn't give me the most confidence what the coaching staff saw from the quarterback position. But I do think he is somebody who could, if he wins the starting job, he's not going to go out there and win the Big Ten for you or win the division, but he's a capable quarterback.
Jag.
Agreed. Yeah, I think so. Here's one for you. Have you seen the Jalen McLeod kid Auburn picked up? Or I think picked up? I don't want to break news here. If he's not out there.
Here you go. The things are trending towards.
Auburn is zeroing in on Jalen McLeod.
Isn't that the guy that got? Sorry, I watched him this morning. I liked him quite a bit. Where is the App State kid in the portal? Their edge rusher. I thought I saw he was going to Auburn. Sorry, it's been a kind of a crazy morning. Mags left early this morning. So App State has a kid in the portal. This is really good podcast.
My wife left me.
Seriously, yeah, I had to get two kids out the door.
If that happened to any of us, I know we'd still show up. We'd need each other too badly. We need to cover 3 grand.
What are we gonna do?
If we got left in the morning, we're not missing the show. Come on.
Okay, so I'm correct. I was mostly correct. He got a crystal ball to Auburn. I don't think he's publicly announced that he's going to Auburn yet. Jalen McLeod is the right name, so I'm mostly on the right track here. Anyway, like this guy's a pretty nice player for them. I think Auburn is just doing a sneaky good job in the transfer portal. Like they got a lot of targets that are not like top 2 at the position in the portal, but they're acting fast on dudes who are probably like at the upper range of prospects they can get, and they're getting them. Like I like how they rebuilt their offensive line. This guy played really well last year against Texas A&M.
Solid role dudes.
Yeah. Do you want a trivia question on the portal?
Yes.
All right. Who is the only G5 conference champion that did not lose a player to the transfer portal to a P5 team this offseason?
Troy.
No.
Tulane.
They lost somebody as well. Troy lost the Barber receiver to Oregon.
Oh, that's right. Who won the Conference USA?
Toledo.
UTSA won Conference USA, and Zachary Franklin just hit the portal. So I think we can. I'm sort of preemptively counting Zachary Franklin as a Power 5 player.
Come to Illinois, Zachary.
Chip nailed it. Toledo. Like I was going through some of the MAC stuff this morning to do my prep, and we're probably losing viewers by the minute. I apologize. Western Michigan lost 6 Power 5 transfers. Toledo won the conference, didn't lose anybody. There's something to be said for having a sweet spot of like good college players who don't have the length or speed to play at the P5 level that don't leave your program.
Tryhards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really committed to the team.
Yeah.
Moxie.
Hey, you can win the MAC with some people that don't
Maxie.
have the measurables.
Look at Carlton Marshall at Troy, right? I mean, he didn't get drafted. He's small, and I don't think he ran very well. But the guy's like super good at that level. I think there's an inefficiency, man. Like recruiting in the high school level, and be like, okay, if this guy hits, he's going to be really good at this level, but he's never going to have the length that a P5 team says, yeah, we want you.
Coming up on the other side, we dive into the big old bag of mail with a time-honored tradition. If you could change one moment in all of college football history, what would it be? That and more next.
A Paramount Plus subscription is now included with your Walmart Plus membership.
Tell the world what happens when they cross me.
For no additional cost, members get a mountain of entertainment.
Are you accusing me of something?
This is great.
Sign up for a Walmart Plus membership and watch all of this and more with your Paramount Plus subscription.
I'm gonna trust you on this.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. This question cycles around every now and then, and certainly it's a fun one to pull from the big old bag of mail. So if you could change one moment in all of college football history, what would it be?
I love this question, and there's so many you could do. Do you guys have one that really stands out?
Yeah.
I have one that stands out to me, but I want to hear yours first, Chip.
The pass interference call in the Ohio State-Miami championship game.
Oh yeah, let's do some ratings.
I think that is like the true beginning of the end for my, this is vibes, this is just like all the stuff that none of the numbers can account for. But when you get screwed like that on that stage at the very end of that incredible, with like all that roster and that team and everything else, I think if Miami wins that national championship, they do not carry. I'm ready to get fried for this. I suspect that there is a little bit of a defeatist, we're going to get screwed by everything that comes from the heartbreak of that moment. And the defeatist, we're going to get screwed by everything, is a losing mindset. And I think if Miami wins that national championship, Miami enters the ACC with a whole lot more momentum. I think if Miami wins that national championship, they enter the ACC and they actually jump into the league and do what they were expected to do when they put Florida State on one side and Miami on the other. And I think that ACC football doesn't spend the entire BCS era floundering, going 2-13 in BCS bowl games. So if I could change one thing, I think that the ACC football would be better and would not have the reputation it does if Miami wins that national championship.
So, Chip, the one thing you want to change is a guy playing defense. You don't want to let people play defense anymore. You want to get rid of any rule that would hurt the offense. It hurt your feelings to see a defense win a play at the end. You know what? You can say as if he pass interference. I would just get rid of pass interference. Call it holding or illegal contact. Get rid of pass interference. It's nebulous. There's no true definition. I do think you make some interesting points though, but no. The one thing I would change, I would go back in time to about a little over 10 years ago, and I would not create the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
I would stick with the BCS. The BCS, we hated it at the time, and I understand why we hated it at the time, because we hate what we don't understand, and there was always the question marks of, well, what about the third best team? What about the fourth? Blah, blah, blah. So we expanded to 4. And it turns out the two best teams are still the two best teams every single year, and they tend to meet in the title game, or they don't. TCU upsets one of them and then loses by 50 in the title game. I would rather just have the 1 versus 2, let everything else stay the same. And I think that creating the playoff has led to a lot of the stuff we have to deal with now, where we talk about keeping the spirit of the game. Meanwhile, USC and UCLA will be in the Big Ten. Texas and Oklahoma, Texas A&M, all these schools are in the SEC. Nebraska's in the Big Ten. All of this stuff is happening because of the college football playoff, because of the revenue, because it's all become about television, and it's no longer about the sport. So if I could change anything, I would just go back to the BCS. We were fine. The sport was doing wonderful. You would really make a ton of money with only 2 teams playing for the title game and the rest of the bowl games and the rest of the TV packages and all of that fun stuff. So that's my change. Bud, what is yours?
Tom, I'm actually going to agree with you on that, because I just think 4 is the most flawed number. Like, if you told me you wanted to stick with the BCS or go to 12, I'm pretty equally okay with either of those things. I mean, the BCS was really corrupt, obviously, but 4 is the one that I think was uniquely bad for the sport, because you knew that once you created it, all of the coverage would be centered on the playoff. But 4 is such an exclusionary number. Just by rule, if you have 5 Power 5 conferences, and it's just a really bad number, and it was only created because it was the only way you could get some of the power away from the bowl committees that kept greasing the power players in the sport. I'm going to go. To me, there are 2 quarterback injuries that changed national title games, right, or national title seasons, and there's one that stands out to me. There's probably more than this, but if you go back to like the 70s and 80s, but just in the last like 20 something years, there are 2 that really impacted it. Chris Winkie breaking his neck against Wake Forest, right? Like, Tennessee beats FSU by a score in the Fiesta Bowl because they had to play Marcus Alton, who was terrible. I don't think if you have the Heisman Trophy winner in Winkie that you lose to Tennessee. That would give FSU 4 national titles. I don't think it really changes the sport all that much, though. I mean, they would go on to win the following year. Doesn't really matter. So I'm not going to go with that one. And obviously Winkie was fine. Like, he didn't, end up messed up the rest of his life or anything. The one that I'm going to focus in on here, though, is Dennis Dixon not tearing his ACL in that game at Arizona State, which Oregon still won. But we got to go back 15 years ago to 2007. This is back when teams really did not have an answer for Chip Kelly, if you guys recall. I mean, they beat some very good teams. Like, they beat a good Fresno team 52-21. They went on the road and beat Harbaugh's Stanford team 55-31. They lost to a number 6 overall Cal team. That's back when Cal was really damn good, by 1 score. They crushed Washington State. They crushed Washington, 5-score win, 3-score win. They beat a top 10 USC team. They also beat that Arizona State team back when we didn't know Dixon was hurt, by 2 scores. That was and then the next week. This was pretty horrific to watch. Dennis Dixon's knee just completely buckles, right? Mm-hmm. And they lose to Arizona, and that was basically like the rest of their season was shot. The next week, they're totally flat. UCLA shuts them out. I mean, this is the team that was averaging 48 points a game entering the contest, and then they lose the Civil War in overtime because Dixon, with the torn ACL, is done. It's like, apparently he tore the knee in the Arizona State game. We didn't realize it, and then his knee just collapsed out from under him, like on a non-hit, right? If I recall, it wasn't just
going out of bounds.
I'm trying. Yeah.
I've got him going out of bounds, like on the lower screen. Like, as I'm watching on TV, he's coming to the near sideline, and it just gives way. Sucks.
I think that team was the best team that year, and LSU won the national title with 2 losses, right? And they crushed Ohio State, I think, in the Sugar Bowl. They had to play there.
I believe so.
That changes the sport, I think, because if you have a team that's not named USC that's won a national title in like the last 25 years, Washington got one in, was it 90 or 91? I think 91. That gives the Pac-12 a lot more juice, because Oregon's been close 2 other times. They lost to Ohio State and they lost to Auburn. Whether or not Michael Dyer was down, I guess, is up for debate. But that's like the one QB injury that I can really think of that changed the sport just a ton.
Here is a question from the chat. This one comes from Matthew. Matthew asks, if the transfer portal was around for Josh Allen, do you think he would have been swiped by a bigger program, or who else could have possibly changed school?
Yeah, for sure. He'd have been gone somewhere for like his
Well, yeah,
final year.
especially with the way that the quarterback transfer dominoes fall, and you're sitting out here trying to load up on anybody with tools and potential. Then yeah, he definitely would have gone to a Power 5. He would have left Wyoming and gone to a Power 5 program who needed a quarterback.
I mean, I think too, like, especially if you look at, and it worked out for him, but Josh Allen was playing in an offense with Craig Bowl as his coach. Like, if he wanted to improve, he was worried about his NFL draft stock, he would have moved on to a bigger program with a more kind of, pass happy offense than what he was in Wyoming.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ben Roethlisberger, I think, absolutely is a guy that stands out. Like nowadays, the MAC would not keep was he top 10 pick?
Yes. He was
I know that. Yeah. Would not keep like a top 10, top 15 pick at quarterback, just with how things go. So like he would be one that stands out to me.
It was funny, like, think of how things have changed. Roethlisberger is a great example because when Roethlisberger was drafted, like, action for most people, like, who the hell is Ben Roethlisberger? Because he played at Miami, Ohio, and this was when the MAC wasn't playing on Tuesday, Wednesday nights all the time, so you didn't really get a chance to see any of these games. So yeah, like, I remember my reaction was, he looks pretty big. I have no idea who he is. Good luck, Steelers. Worked out pretty well for him.
Do you think somebody would have plucked Jordan Love?
For sure.
Yeah. Do you remember the Jordan Love for Heisman material?
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, you didn't get that mailer? You
No,
didn't get the nice little notepad with like, oh, you know what else they sent? Shout out to Utah State. They sent candy hearts.
Yes.
With Jordan Love's name on it. And it was like a love for Heisman. Like it was it was a lot of hype. It didn't end up panning out exactly, but we'll see if it pans out down the line. That's for sure. Jordan Love.
Utah State missed, man. Like I just did a YouTube short. Check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/cover3, on the best Heisman campaigns ever. Right. And I like candy hearts. I would have maybe put you guys on there. Didn't send it to me.
I still have my Ed Oliver horse bobblehead around here somewhere. That was a good one. That kind of started the whole bobblehead trend.
Ron Dane weekly postcards for him to break the record was
good.
Pretty good. West Virginia sent out a record for Jeff Hostetler called Old Hoss to remind people, which is kind of like, there's some pretty wild ones. Navy did something for Roger Staubach. That was kind of the OG one. I think there's a couple of other good ones in there.
Got a bottle of maple syrup that Illinois sent out for Chase Brown last year because he's Canadian. So
there you go.
There we go. and head on over to youtube.com/cover3 to check out that short. Again, Bud throwing up the best Heisman campaigns. Coming up on the other side, why should any 5-star recruit sign a national letter of intent? Why do they? Should they? And what are their options? We'll dive into that. And is Liberty going to lose a single game in the regular season? Next.
Come and get it.
So much new business.
So when are you going to put those needles in? Ow, my back.
So much new butthead.
Yeah, baby. Parenthood is cool.
I now pronounce you husband and husband.
This is the happiest day of my life.
So many all new reasons.
Hail, infinite earthling.
To stay on the couch.
Let the games begin.
An all new season of Beavis and Butthead now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus. Use promo code Nachos for 1 month free.
Did you guys see this Bama thing?
No. What?
They just fired their head baseball coach.
For the betting scandal.
So at first I was like, is this a match fixing scandal? Because I just thought, like, the juice cannot be worth the squeeze there, given how low the limits are on college baseball, right? Like, are you really going to try to fix college baseball games when the max bet at a lot of these places is like $100? All
right, well, hold on. Let me.
I don't want to accuse a guy of that. Obviously.
Let's do a little reset. Let's do a little reset. Right. So, the Gaming Commission in Ohio signaled, like the oversight group that they have signaled unusual activity on an Alabama LSU baseball game. And they stopped taking bets on that game, and they stopped taking bets on Alabama baseball in general until the matter was resolved.
What I had read was that it seemed like just like if you know a guy's out in a football game, right? Like you may bet that side, like a lot of our listeners probably do if they happen to know somebody's out. And the books were slow to react to that, like they didn't know the starting pitcher was out. But I'm curious to see where this story goes, because this seems like it's a little more than that. But I don't want to accuse the guy of something. I was like, I don't know. When I had first seen like tweets, like there's no way that like there can't be a match fixing scandal in college baseball. Like it's just not.
Why do you say there can't be?
Well, like in college basketball, you can get down sizable wagers even on bad games. Like an average account can probably still get 1,000 or 2,000 on some crappy teams that are like 280th for 310th or something, right? Like if you're going to do something like that, you would need to have places you can get down to make it worth your while. I don't know. I mean, I guess there could be. Just
all I know is if I've learned anything this week when it comes to the media and college baseball in the same space, you should be careful of what you say because there are repercussions.
What happened?
Just saying, if you're trying to grow the game and maybe you're reading something and you don't read ahead, you might say something that might cost you your job.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that was college baseball related, but yeah.
No, it wasn't, but the person.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I don't know. That's a wild story.
I'm as I'm sitting here with a plumber and a technician and like people all over trying to fix my house. When you said this Alabama thing, my heart sank. And when you said Alabama baseball, I said, oh, thank goodness, because now we can just proceed with the show as scheduled. From Rudder Butter asks, if my son is a 5-star recruit, say a quarterback or offensive tackle recruit, why would I have him sign a national letter of intent? What benefits does it give the most elite players out there? And I know that, Bud, you've talked about this a little bit, so I feel like I know the answers to the test, but I like where he went with some of these follow-ups. The top teams would still risk taking an elite prospect if he doesn't sign the papers. If players don't sign NIL and aren't on scholarships, can they transfer as many times as they like? Does the NIL prevent them from transferring? I used to think the only thing stopping this was several families that couldn't afford tuition, but now with NIL, that should not be an issue for any 5-star player. So why should any elite prospect sign a national letter of intent?
So I think he's in some ways conflating two separate things, not signing an NIL. And then also I think he's adding a qualifier there on the end of that, one of the follow-ups about, which I think implies that a player is a walk-on. So not signing a letter of intent does not make you a walk-on, just for clarity. Let's talk NIL first. If I'm a 5-star, I would not sign an NIL, right? It's a one-sided deal. It locks you into the school. The school can still get out of the deal. It's pretty hard for you to get out of your deal. Although in recent years, it's a little easier because of Twitter and public pressure on these schools that are trying to be jerks and, mess with kids who are 18. If you sign a letter of intent, you're locked in for the most part. Even if a coach leaves, it can be tough to get out. Some of these schools will play hardball with you. If I'm a 5-star, every school in the country is going to take me, assuming that 5-star grade is accurate. And, if it's from 24/7 Sports, chances are that it is. I'm going to just say, hey, guess what? I'm going to enroll when I enroll. I'll sign some financial aid papers, right? Just to get that ball rolling so you guys can be ready for when I get here. And I could sign financial aid documents with multiple schools. Dalvin Cook did it, right? And just, decided to enroll. I think Clowney ended up either not signing NIL or NLI or waited a long time to do so. I think Pryor, right? Didn't he wait quite a bit too?
He waited a while.
Yeah. Really elite kid. I don't think there's much benefit to it. However, if you're a really elite kid who wants to cash in from a school's collective, you cannot condition NIL on the signing of an NLI. But
that's confusing.
I guarantee
that's the regulation I would bring. We need to change the NIL, NLI kind of abbreviations because they're way too similar.
Totally. I don't think we're going to have NIL for more than about another half decade, if I had to guess, or at least not like significant NIL.
But maybe a 401k.
Yes, something like that. Now, if you are trying to secure your bag, it may be hard to do that if you're holding out until you enroll. You may not get a dime until you enroll. from that thing. Because they're like, all right, if we know you're coming, here's a check. If you're going to hold out here and still consider all these schools, not getting a check yet. But I would still wait because stuff like Bob Stoops happens, right? I'm signed to a school. All of a sudden he drops that he's leaving in May? Right? It wasn't like after spring practice. It was pretty late. We do see guys at big time schools, coaches resign or leave jobs very late in the process. So I want to keep my options open.
Understandable. Let's go back to the chat. This one comes from Kyle. He got in a little bit early. Want to make sure we get it. Kyle asks, will the continued rise of, quote, basketball on grass, Bryles offense with the continued rise of basketball on grass, Bryles offense, have receivers and corners become more important to success than the line of scrimmage? And he said, have or when will receivers and corners become more important to success than the line of scrimmage?
Depends on how you define success. If you want to win a national championship, probably not for a long time. If you want to win your conference, maybe, depending on what conference you're in. But if you're in the SEC, I think you're still going to want monsters on the lines before you want receivers.
Lincoln Riley, he told you. He said, he was like, yeah, the reason that we're not having success, and he was saying at the time, this is when he was at Oklahoma, he said it with the follow-up of like, and we're trying to address that. We're trying to get even better. We're trying to get even bigger at the line of scrimmage. But that's about as good. His run with Oklahoma is one of the like great offensive runs that we've had in the last 10 to 15 years. And as soon as they got to the college football playoff, they couldn't win a game. And I think that was because of the line of scrimmage. So I think that was a good point, Tom. I was going to say, no, it hasn't become more important. But I guess if your success is that you're just trying to go from 4 wins to 8 wins, then yeah, receivers and corners might be more important. But to win at the highest level, I still think you need the line of scrimmage.
I think you could argue that maybe like the importance curve is a little bit differently shaped. So like if you go like this, for whatever, that looks bad on video. At the very, very top, like you could argue like I would rather have Marvin Harrison than Olu Fashanu, right? Like the very best receiver over like the very best offensive tackle in the sport is probably more valuable. And we're seeing that in the NFL. There are some guys at the receiver position who get paid an absolute ton, like a Justin Jefferson. But I think as you go down the list a little bit, the slope of the curve for elite line players probably remains higher in terms of importance. Like the replacement level, I think, drops pretty quickly. If that, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but
I don't think there's enough good corners. I would
agree.
I think that you can have B+ receivers that can be stars, because I just don't think that there's enough good corners in college football for you to be able to like shut down multiple receivers. If I'm running out 4 wide and my one guy is awesome and you put your best corner on there, then you talk about drop off. I think the drop off to those other receivers is probably less than your drop off to your second and then definitely to your third best corner.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. I mean, if specifically with this offense, and we'll call it the beer and shoot, since these guys at Tennessee weren't on that Baylor staff. They got shut down last year by Georgia because Georgia just said, we're going to play a man down in the box and you still can't run the ball on us. We're going to put an extra guy in coverage. We're going to win coverage with numbers, not necessarily just with personnel. And yeah, Jalen Carter and some of these guys will mess your lineup, and they did. So I still would rather take the premium positions, I think, and be. It's harder to scheme around bad line play than bad skill position play. I think.
I'd agree with that. Thank you to Kyle. And again, any of these Thursday shows, you come in before the show starts, drop a question. It's a great way to get it to our attention, because once we get off and rolling, I mean, Tom's so good looking, Bud's so engaging. It's just like it's hard to keep tabs on everything. All right, let's go back to the 5-star big old bag of mail. This question comes from Ray. Really simple. Fellas, take a look at Liberty's schedule for 2023. Easiest of all time? ? Where is the loss? And of course, this comes as Liberty is going to be playing its first season in Conference USA. It comes as Liberty has, in my opinion, excellent head coach taking over in Jamie Chadwell, coming off the success at Coastal Carolina. And so now, I mean, I can read it, or you can just start out by answering the question, is there a loss? Where is the loss?
Let's read the games in which they will not be double-digit favorites and then maybe pick from there. All right, that's like 5 games. They're probably not double digits at Buffalo. I don't know if they're double digits at FIU.
Yeah.
At Jacksonville State.
Yes.
Close to it, I guess.
Jacksonville State probably going to be better than most people assume, but yeah.
If the quarterback gets the waiver, they're still waiting on that. The Webb kid he needs the 7th year. Middle Tennessee, they will not be double digits over, I don't think. Jordan,
at Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
They will not be double-digit favorites.
Louisiana Tech, who I know today got a JUCO commitment from a D tackle that a couple of schools in CUSA we're looking at. And then at UTEP, depending, like UTEP's been okay. This is the easiest schedule in the country, though.
Yes.
Oh, like if we were to run some strength of schedule numbers, they would be 133.
I think so. And it would be like, if you were to run the numbers among teams that don't play an FCS game, I think it would be like 133 by a mile.
And so I can run through this real quick. They open with Bowling Green, non-con on the road. They play New Mexico State. They play Buffalo on the road, FIU, Sam Houston, Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech, ODU, UMass, and UTEP. And for those who, again, are just sort of keeping up, not only is Liberty in Conference USA, so is Jacksonville State, so is Sam Houston. Those are all conference games for the Flames. The only game, like do you think that they will win a game? They'll lose a game? No. If there is a loss, where is it? At Western Kentucky. Is it the easiest schedule of all time? Perhaps.
They'll lose a game. Probably at Western Kentucky, but they will lose a game. I don't think they're talented enough to just look at their schedule as easy as it is and say, oh, yeah, that team's going undefeated.
It's hard for me to figure out what this team is because last year they had some. Do you remember what they were last year? Like they had some nice wins and also just pulling this up. They had some really, really weird losses. And I think part of it was maybe the team checking out because they knew Freeze was leaving. But
they finished with 4 straight losses at UConn, Virginia Tech, New Mexico State beat them by 35.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And they lost to Toledo in the bowl game. Like they played Arkansas really tough.
They beat Arkansas. That's what got Hugh the job.
They beat the crap out of BYU. I think that was the game when we all thought that the QB for BYU was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Hall.
Yeah, and they weren't saying anything.
Speaking of making wagers on some hearsay on injuries.
Right. They almost lost to Gardner Webb. They beat Gardner Webb by a point. Like they really didn't kill UMass. Like they played Akron, who was the worst team in the MAC, pretty close. Like to single score game there. Single score against UAB. They lost at Wake by 1 point. I mean, it's hard for me to get a feel like what the baseline of this team was because looking at the schedule, they played way over expectation in the 3 biggest games that they had, or 4 really, if you count Vatek of the year. And I think that was Freeze. If you told me, and I don't know this, but if you told me Freeze was like, I'm going to try really hard in these 4 biggest games because we don't play in a conference. So it doesn't matter if we lose some of these whatever games, nobody will really notice. I would buy that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were probably 100 points. Like they were probably 3 touchdowns better against the spread against the 4 big teams that they played.
Yeah, I'm not judging it, but I think it's pretty safe to say Hugh was auditioning in some games compared to others.
Is ODU the next closest threat? And that game is going to be because in-state rivalry. It's not going to be a conference game, right? ODU is Sun Belt. Think that could be it?
Possibly.
Yeah, it could be. Because I don't know what to make of Jacksonville State. At UTEP, UTEP could be.
At UTEP could be, but I mean, ODU's got the Virginia Tech win. ODU's I think Ricky Ronnie's a good coach. I mean, shoot, we just saw ODU have multiple players put in the NFL draft.
I mean, I know Western Michigan seems to be pretty happy about getting Hayden Wolf, the transfer, and I think he might got beat out there at ODU. So that probably says there's some positive signal to that. I think you can read into it that ODU may be better this year.
I will say to that UTEP game in El Paso in late November,
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Might not be the warmest environment, might be pretty windy and cold. Liberty might struggle in that.
could be.
If
All right,
I'm
let's
UTEP,
do-
I'm playing that game at night, by the way. I am doing everything I can to make that a night kick.
100%.
I'll
All right,
watch.
let's do one last one, and let's do this one from the chat. Kyle asks, could FSU be a little fool's gold this year? Was their run to end the season more of a product of their greatness or a bad ACC and a favorable bowl draw?
Yeah, totally could be. I mean, so if you look at this, look, we've said this a little bit too. So, like last year, they went what, 1-3 against the 4 best teams they played: Wake, NC State, Clemson, LSU.
But with the package of but they were hurt. Like, I mean,
They were
this,
hurt.
you know, you are able to build in some excuses there that make it a little more palatable. You know, put the medicine in the ice cream and you're going to be able to get it down.
And then when they went on their run, they played. I mean, it was really a joke of a schedule in terms of who was actually available for the teams they played. I think they played 4 straight hurt or backup quarterbacks, or both, or hurt backups in some cases. Like Louisiana's kid was out for the year. Syracuse was a mess injury wise, and they pasted them 38-3. Miami, I mean, Van Dyke has like a non-contact arm injury in that game. Probably shouldn't have played. One of their starting linemen went out in pregame warmups. Georgia Tech was a joke at that point, and their starter was out. So, I think I would be more receptive to this argument if they just tried to run back the same team and had not added to it via the portal. But they're very much in contention for Keon Coleman too. So, and I think they're going to upgrade the secondary most likely as well. They didn't lose any guys who I was projecting to be starters on this team to the portal, but they did add quite a few guys who I think have come in and taken starting jobs. So I think the roster's better. I saw Schleybaugh rated him 3rd. I'm not with that. But if you want to put him anywhere between 5 and 12 to start the year, I really don't have a huge problem. Hell, if you want to have him 15, that's fine too. I can totally see the skepticism.
No chance.
At least they had them. At least they did pound the bad teams down the stretch, which is a sign of a team that's getting better. They beat the crap out of those guys.
Florida State's back. No chance. Not
Florida
fool's
State's
gold.
back. College
Florida
football playoff
State's
this year: Georgia, Florida State, Texas, USC. Everybody is back, and they're coming after the dogs.
I mean, I have repeated this line up and down the Atlantic Coast Conference circuit. It's Bud's line, and I give him credit for it, so I can plug the Cover 3 podcast. But they feel they have 2 competent offensive lines, and for years they didn't have one. That's improvement. You want to talk about winning at the line of scrimmage? The question we were just talking about. Florida State has real depth along the offensive line. They've got good skill players. They've got a dynamic quarterback. They have an elite edge rusher, a solid defense, great defensive backfield. They're just they are not a national championship contender when you stack the roster up, but damn, they don't have a lot of holes. They don't have a lot of concerns, and that's a great place to start, especially considering where Florida State has been, which in my opinion has been held together by duct tape as much as possible.
Yeah, Noles are back for sure.
Noles are back.
Undefeated.
Here we go. It starts in Orlando. It finishes in, where are we for the national championship?
I don't know. It might finish in a semifinal against Texas or USC first too. You don't know, but they're getting there undefeated. Nobody's stopping the Noles.
Georgia, Florida State, Texas, and USC.
I'd watch.
That'd do ratings. That'd do numbies.
That'd be huge ratings.
Yeah.
3 teams that haven't made it in about a decade or have never made it.
And then Ohio State and Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Boom.
See, this is it. We're just telling you exactly the best way that you can live your college football life. The best way you can live your college football life is to come and spend every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time with us, youtube.com/cover3. We will be back on Monday with more, and you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
I will fight any podcast out there, anytime, any place.